Assassin archetype characters are a staple of many MMOs, and Dungeon Fighter Online is no exception. Shadow Dancer is DFO's take on this popular fantasy, and she comes with incredible burst damage, an edgy aesthetic, and a high skill execution barrier that will reward you just as hard as it punishes you for the slightest mistake. In this video, I'm going to try to break down her core skills and mechanics, and hopefully by the end, you can decide if you want to try this class or not. Shadow Dancer shovels out burst damage by setting up back attacks on her powerful skills. These skills can have longer animations that are eventually cancelable or linkable into other skills with her kit. Her back attacks themselves are probably the most important part of her gameplay, netting her anywhere from a 20 to 33% damage increase when done correctly. To complement this playstyle, she has a massive amount of tech that is part of her kit or part of later QOLs or talismans that allow you to be slightly more flexible when playing her in content. It's not an understatement that you lose a massive amount of damage and utilities by not back attacking, not to mention your main source of AoE, of which you have next to none of. The problem in this conditional is that nobody plays perfect, and not all monsters play by your rules. There are a large number of cases where things don't go as planned, mobs ignore holds and move out of the way, or they even turn to face you instead. Thankfully, there are skills that take out half of the work in setting you up for a back attack, to guarantee that your next attack counts as one. Let's start with a quick word on back attacks. Back attacks are self-explanatory. Attack behind, get a back attack. However, back attacks are actually primarily based on where you are relative to the enemy, their position being secondary. As long as your attack connects with the rear half of the enemy, it counts. You can abuse this in larger enemies. Also, on larger type enemies, their backs are actually by default placed on their left side, a soft way of guaranteeing that you can get a back attack on entry. Now, let's go over other ways to set up back attacks. You have four main ways to set up back attacks: Shadow Cut, Covert Operation, Shadow Trip, and Shadow Decoy. On top of this, you can also get a mob to turn their back to you by hitting them 3 times with your basic X string. Most of the time, you're going to be using skills such as Shadow Cut and Covert Operation in order to put you behind the enemy to get a back attack. The next skill to learn is Shadow Trip, a short range gap closer that positions you behind enemies that you make contact with. This is neat, but the real common use for Trip is that it frees you from the animations of certain skills, leaving a shadow behind to do it for you. Finally, we have Shadow Decoy, a skill that when casted normally gives you a temporary guaranteed back attack on your next hit. You can, however, cast it in the middle of most, if not all, animations to immediately turn your current attack into a back attack. This is incredibly useful when you're aware that your current attack is not going to be a back attack, or to simply open up with a frontal back attack skill. I may have said finally, but Shadow Dancer gets new ways to back attack with her third and second awakening. We'll start with her third awakening passive, Rule of the Shadows. This passive allows you to buffer a heart thrust command into finishing animations of all of your skills and immediately blinks you to the current target's rear for heart thrust. You can use this for just about every skill in your arsenal, including X inputs on your second awakening's basic X attack, more on that later. There is, however, an extra little function note to it. If it really matters to you, you can even cancel your pulse finishing animation even more by buffering your heart thrust as usual, but immediately pressing Shadow Trip. Whether or not this is worth it is up to you. Before we move on to her 2A, let's quickly talk about Abyss Drop. This can be used in the air, on the ground, or during a backstep, and propels you a large distance forwards, increasing with height. On contact with the enemy, dunk them while being in significant iframe. Useful when you're in a dangerous spot. Alternatively, use it to set up easy back attacks with Heart Thrust and Rule of Shadows. Chain Reaction is SD's 2A. You get 60 seconds of being able to throw out a chain to interact with enemies in various ways. Your no input skill simply pulls your foe to you if applicable. Note that the enemy targeted will come with their back towards you if possible. However, if the enemy is already being held, it'll come to you as is. X input brings you to the enemy. Nothing else to say really. Space input is really useful. It holds the enemy and lets you set up some of your more easy to miss skills. Back X places you behind the enemy, relative to your current position. Finally, we have your 2A active. Activate Chain Reaction again to do a hold and a large finisher attack. Holding the enemy before using the skill will skip right to the damage. Chain Reaction can be used to cancel the animations of certain skills, which is useful when you want to optimize a bit, or be a bit more fluid with your gameplay. Consider using it during Fatal Blitz or non-talisman assassination. Talismans are where SD got a lot of new cancels and tech that really opened the class up. I'm going to cover the 3 that I consider most important and why I find the class so fun. Starting with Assassination, you now get to freely move if your talisman specific afterimage makes contact with the enemy. Fatal Blitz is your most important talisman. It auto-targets in your shadow dancing area and can also be used to cancel out of many skills. Dagger Throw doesn't do a lot of damage, but the QOL is incredible. The dagger now homes in on targets and lets you cancel out of almost all skills. This is useful for cancelling out of the long pulsed animations of skills like Deadly Dance or to immediately pop Fatal Blitz. Put all these talismans together and you can do some neat stuff. Note that you can itemize to make Fatal Blitz and Assassinate have the same cooldown, enabling you to set up devastating burst combos. So we're going to try to generalize gear, categorizing it and boiling it down to playstyle. That way, maybe this section can be more relevant next cap. Refer to Lux's Shadow Dancer primer for more detailed gear advice. Firstly, if we were to look at both burst and sustain, SD exists in a spot where gearing towards her 2A ends up being both burst and DPS at the same time, and this makes burst seem really appealing. It is really powerful and viable, but it's also really possible to gear for sustain, provided the right conditions exist. Let's not discount that Chain Reaction is a very powerful skill to itemize for. As far as 100 cap gear goes, this means that gear such as Roxy and Crossbow's Belt for its large 2A bonuses and CDR are very much appreciated. In fact, currently, swapping full sets of Awakening based CDR gear in order to ensure that you are able to cast Chain Reaction more is common strategy for most players. In terms of sustain, it would probably be easier to say that it's less sustain and far more of a constant burst. Itemizing into Fatal Blitz is the current meta, and it's incredibly powerful. This allows you to spam Awakening level damage on a short cooldown, and can be paired with correct rune work into becoming a seamless combo with Assassination and Dagger Throw. Towards this end, this is also why it's very common to see builds that prioritize funneling into the Fatal Blitz Talisman, as well as looking for Chain Reaction bonuses for the added DPS. I'm going to play some miscellaneous footage and give some advice while concluding this video. Firstly, going back a bit to gear, let me give you some advice for someone who might want to make this class as an alt in the scope of 100 cap. You can probably save money and do more damage by buying some cheap 22 LE pink cards and going for a Keykeeper set, instead of shelling out tens of millions for 30 elemental damage card and going another set, if you're looking to save some money. Now back to the class itself. My personal opinion on it is that with this cap, with the execution barrier required in order to hit most of your skills, you can expect that you're going to miss a lot of the back attacks until you get familiar with its deeper mechanics, and that's okay. This class was never easy, and it probably does need a minor rework at some point in order to make it more approachable for most players. This cap allowed for itemization into its second awakening and 2 core talisman burst skills, allowing for most players to funnel their damage into a lesser amount of skills to ensure efficient performance. If you want a fast class that is challenging and yet rewards you with stylish and devastating burst damage, this class might be for you. Sure, you might have a hell of a struggle getting used to her, but I hope you fumble and flail along the way and realize that this class gets really fun once you're past that hill of tech that she's capable of.